last video, we talked about how Genesis is the beginning of the entire epic story of Scripture, and that if we want to understand and fully explore all of the meaning and the nuances and the beauty of that epic story, we have to start at the beginning with Genesis. It's the key to unlocking everything. So, I want to look at one of the things Genesis starts to unlock for us. And what we find when we read the creation story is that we're not dealing with a modern historical textbook or a modern biology, science, natural sciences book. What we are reading is a Hebrew poem that is meant to teach us something about the very nature of God and our nature and who we are in relation to God. That's what's happening in this beautiful ancient Hebrew poem that gives us the creation story. What we find when we read that story closely is that it's not so much about being certain or sure of this verifiable scientific process of creation. In a lot of ways, the creation story is about relationships. It shows us relationships in 4 ways in this one little poem that I want to highlight for you. The first is that it shows us God's relationship to creation. In the creation poem, we learn that God is the creator. He is the source. He is the one that brings this creation into being. Nothing created God, but God created everything else, and He gives it order, structure, and purpose. The next relationship we learn about is God's relationship with humanity. God not only creates humanity, but humanity is the pinnacle of God's creation. On days 1 through 5, God creates these other pieces of creation, and He looks at it and He says, this is good. But on day 6, He creates Adam, humanity, human, and He says, this is very good. Not only that, but Adam, humanity, is made in the very image and likeness of God. Nothing else in creation gets to boast that. It's actually God breathing His Spirit in us that brings us to life. So God's relationship to creation, God's relationship to humanity as its creator, but then we also learn about humanity's relationship with creation, because God creates humanity, puts them in the garden, and says, go, work it, steward it, take charge of it, take this creation that God has made and pronounced good, and keep making good with it. So God partners with humanity. Another way that we see God's relationship to humanity, God calls humanity, rather, to partner with God and puts them in charge of creation as its stewards and its caretakers and the ones that are to make it, to cultivate it and make it flourish. But a fourth relationship we learn about is humanity's relationship with each other. God creates Adam, and as things start progressing, He looks at Adam and notices that he's alone. And He says, this isn't good. Man should not be alone. All by myself, don't wanna be one. Here's the loneliest number that you ever did see. 2's not as lonely as 1 because those 2 can get it on under the sun. I made up that last part. It's not good for humanity to be alone. So God creates a partner. And when they're created, these partner, Adam and Eve, they are equals in partnering together with God in stewarding creation. And humanity is given community. They have community with God, who comes and meets them in the garden, and they have community with each other. They were created, and God determined that they should not be alone, but that they should do this thing that God has created them to do together with others. So when we read the creation story, yes, we learn that God is creator, and that in the beginning, God created. But out of that, we learn some very foundational truths that will guide our lives and guide our understanding of the rest of the Scripture. That it's about relationships. God's relationship with creation, God's relationship with humanity, humanity's relationship with creation, and humanity's relationship with each other. So as you read the rest of the stories, remember, you are not alone. You were created for community with God and with each other to go out and keep making good in God's creation. Love you, bye.